the third temple in Jerusalem.
Is the third temple really being built? If this is true, what could it mean for the world today and the prophecies in the Bible? Throughout history, the temple in Jerusalem has played a central role in Jewish faith. The first temple, built by King Solomon around 957 BC, was the holiest place for the Jewish people, but was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. Later, the Second Temple was rebuilt in 516 BC, only to meet the same fate when the Roman Empire demolished it in 70 AD. Since then, for nearly 2 millennia, the Jewish people have had no temple. But now, more and more rumors and signs suggest that the construction of the Third Temple may be underway. If this is true, it could be a groundbreaking event, not just for Israel, but for the entire world. Could this be the fulfillment of ancient prophecies? For years, efforts have been quietly advancing toward the possibility of a third temple. The Temple Institute, an organization in Jerusalem dedicated to this vision, has been meticulously preparing. They have reconstructed nearly every sacred item needed for temple worship, according to biblical specifications, ensuring that when the time comes, everything will be ready. The golden menorah, once a central fixture in the temple, has already been crafted and is on public display in Jerusalem. The table of showbread, where 12 loaves are placed weekly, is complete. The golden altar, priestly garments, silver trumpets, and incense pans all are fully functional, designed for immediate use when the temple is rebuilt. These are not museum pieces or symbolic gestures. They are meant for an operational temple. But preparing objects is one thing. The real challenge lies in purification. According to biblical law, the temple and its priests must be purified before sacrifices can resume. And for that, something rare and essential is required: a red heifer. Numbers 19:2 lays out a strict command. Only the ashes of a red heifer, a cow without blemish or defect, can be used in the purification ritual. For centuries, such a perfect specimen has been almost impossible to find. Then, in 2022, a breakthrough occurred. 5 red heifers were imported from Texas to Israel, each carefully examined to ensure they met the biblical criteria. Now, 3 years later, they have reached the required age for sacrifice. And the Temple Institute has announced a date: Passover 2025. This is the first time in modern history that red heifers meeting the biblical requirements have been prepared for sacrifice in Israel. Many see this as a turning point, the strongest indication yet that the Third Temple may soon rise. But others remain cautious, pointing out that while preparations are advancing, significant hurdles remain. The idea of rebuilding the temple is deeply controversial. For many Jewish believers, it represents the ultimate fulfillment of prophecy, the moment when temple worship is restored, and the Messianic age begins. The book of Ezekiel describes a future temple in great detail, leading some to believe its construction is inevitable. But for Christians, the temple holds a different significance. Some see it as an essential step in biblical prophecy, tied to the second coming of Christ. Others warn that it could be the stage for future conflicts, citing 2 Thessalonians 2:4, which speaks of a figure declaring himself divine in the temple, an event some associate with the Antichrist. Beyond theology, there are serious political challenges. The current site where the First and Second Temples once stood is now home to the Dome of the Rock, one of Islam's holiest sites. Any attempt to rebuild the temple at that location could trigger massive unrest, not just in Israel, but across the Muslim world. Political leaders, historians, and analysts have long debated whether such a project could ever happen without igniting a regional or even global conflict. But history has shown that whenever a temple has stood in Jerusalem, it has been the center of world-changing events. The destruction of Solomon's temple led to exile. The fall of the Second Temple marked the beginning of the Jewish diaspora. If a third temple is built, what kind of shift will it bring? Will it usher in an era of peace and divine fulfillment? Or will it be the spark that ignites unprecedented turmoil? So, how's the world react to the building of Third Temple? Throughout history, the idea of rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem has remained more than just a religious aspiration. It has been a symbol of faith, a political flashpoint, and a prophecy that, for many, holds the key to the future of Israel and the world. Now, the Sanhedrin has revived this vision, issuing a call not just to the people of Israel, but to Jewish communities across the globe. This is not merely a spiritual appeal, it is a summons, an invitation, a challenge. The Sanhedrin urges Jews everywhere, from the bustling streets of New York to the historical heart of Europe, from South America to Australia, to return to Israel and take part in what could become one of the most transformative moments in modern Jewish history: the construction of the Third Temple. But rebuilding the temple is not just a matter of faith. It is a political and diplomatic puzzle, one that cannot be solved without international recognition and support. The Sanhedrin understands this, which is why they have turned to global leaders, seeking their endorsement, their backing, and ultimately, their influence in making this vision a reality. The Sanhedrin has approached some of the most influential figures of our time, seeking not only their public support, but also their ability to shape policies that could facilitate the temple's construction. Among them, two names stand out: Russian President Vladimir Putin and former U.S. President Donald Trump. Putin's position is particularly interesting, as the leader of a nation that has long played a crucial role in Middle Eastern politics. His relationship with Israel has been one of strategic pragmatism. Russia maintains close ties with Israel, but it also holds significant influence over key Arab nations, particularly Syria and Iran. If Putin were to support the rebuilding of the temple, how would that affect his standing among Israel's adversaries? Would he risk alienating allies in the Muslim world? Or would he see this as an opportunity to redefine Russia's role in the region? Trump, on the other hand, has already left a lasting mark on Jerusalem's history. His administration made the unprecedented decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a move that was met with both praise and backlash. Under his leadership, the U.S. also facilitated the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations between Israel and several Arab nations. Given his past actions, it is not unthinkable that he might lend his support to the Sanhedrin's vision. But the question remains: would even Trump, known for his willingness to disrupt the global order, dare to endorse a project as controversial as the Third Temple? While political support from global superpowers is one thing, the Sanhedrin's outreach goes even further. They have extended an invitation to the Arab world, specifically to the descendants of Ishmael. This outreach is based on the prophecy found in the book of Isaiah, which speaks of a future where the descendants of Ishmael will bring offerings to the temple, standing alongside the people of Israel in worship. To some, this idea presents a rare opportunity, a chance to bridge a centuries-old divide, to turn a historical rivalry into a partnership built on shared faith and tradition. Could this be the moment when Jews and Arabs, bound by a common Abrahamic heritage, come together to fulfill a divine prophecy? Could the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael, once at odds, unite in an unprecedented act of reconciliation and faith? The idea is powerful. It is hopeful. It is rooted in Scripture. But in reality, the response from the Muslim world has been overwhelmingly negative. To understand why, one must consider the significance of the Temple Mount in Islam. The very location where the Third Temple would stand is currently home to Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. The mere suggestion of altering its status has historically triggered global outrage, protests, and, at times, violence. History is filled with examples of how deeply sensitive this issue is. In 1969, when an extremist set fire to Al-Aqsa, the Muslim world responded with immediate and unified condemnation. More recently, minor changes to security measures around the site have led to violent confrontations. If something as small as additional security checkpoints can ignite such unrest, what would happen if an effort were made to rebuild the temple? To many in the Muslim world, this is not just a matter of religious difference. It is an existential threat. The Temple Mount is seen as an untouchable Islamic landmark, and any attempt to change its status is viewed as a direct challenge to the sovereignty of Islam in Jerusalem. Conflicts and political issues surrounding the Third Temple. The debate over the Third Temple is not just a theological discussion. It is a battleground of religious, political, and historical claims that stretch back thousands of years. While some view it as the fulfillment of prophecy, others see it as a provocation that could destabilize the region. At the heart of this controversy is the Temple Mount, a site so sacred, so contested, that even the smallest actions there can have global repercussions. The Temple Mount is arguably the most disputed religious site in the world. For Jews, it is the holiest place on earth, the site where the first and second temples once stood, the place where God's presence was said to dwell. Rebuilding the temple is not merely a matter of national pride. It is a spiritual duty, deeply ingrained in Jewish belief and history. For Muslims, however, the site is home to Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, two of the most important structures in Islam. According to Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven from this very spot. It is the third holiest site in the Muslim world, after Mecca and Medina. To Muslims, any attempt to alter its status is seen as an attack on their faith, their history, and their sovereignty in Jerusalem. This deep-rooted religious significance means that any change to the Temple Mount's status, no matter how small, has the potential to ignite widespread unrest. The region has already seen decades of conflict over sovereignty in Jerusalem. Could an actual attempt to construct the Third Temple trigger something even larger, perhaps a religious war? For decades, Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount has been strictly prohibited under an agreement known as the status quo. This arrangement was put in place after the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel captured East Jerusalem but allowed the Islamic Waqf, a Jordanian religious trust, to maintain administrative control over the site. Under this agreement, Jews and other non-Muslims could visit the Temple Mount, but they were forbidden from engaging in religious activities there. However, in recent years, these restrictions have begun to loosen, whether intentionally or through shifting social dynamics. Jewish groups advocating for the temple's reconstruction have grown more vocal, pushing the boundaries of the status quo. Small prayer gatherings have taken place on the Temple Mount, often leading to clashes with Muslim worshippers. Some see this as an assertion of religious freedom. Why, they argue, should Jews be forbidden from praying at their holiest site? But for the Muslim world, these actions are not about prayer. They are about power. To them, increased Jewish presence at the Temple Mount signals a gradual takeover, an attempt to reclaim a site that they view as exclusively Islamic. The situation is becoming increasingly volatile. Any further shift, such as an official change in Israeli policy allowing open Jewish prayer, could lead to a major crisis, potentially drawing in neighboring Arab nations and even triggering wider regional conflicts. The problem is that this ritual has been conducted near the Al-Aqsa Mosque, fueling suspicions and outrage among Palestinian and Muslim leaders. To them, this is not just a religious ceremony. It is a calculated act, a message that temple activists are moving forward with their plans, regardless of opposition. Palestinian leaders have repeatedly denounced these rituals as deliberate provocations, warning that they could escalate tensions and lead to unrest. Some believe that this is a strategy, slowly increasing Jewish religious activity near the Temple Mount to prepare the public for the eventual reality of a third temple. Whether or not this is true, the perception alone is enough to stir tensions. Could conflict erupt over the third temple? The short answer? Yes. History has shown that even symbolic gestures related to the Temple Mount can spark violence. In 2000, the Second Intifada erupted after then Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon visited the site. What was intended as a political statement quickly spiraled into a full-scale uprising that lasted for years. If something as seemingly simple as a visit could have such explosive consequences, what would happen if actual construction began? Some believe that an attempt to rebuild the temple could lead to another Palestinian uprising, possibly even a third intifada. Others fear that it could ignite a broader religious war, pulling in Arab nations and even prompting global involvement. With tensions already high between Israel and Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, the prospect of further escalation is not difficult to imagine. At the same time, there are those who argue that, if handled correctly, the project could be achieved without bloodshed. They point to the Abraham Accords, historic agreements that normalized relations between Israel and several Arab nations, as evidence that cooperation is possible. Could a similar diplomatic effort pave the way for Jewish access to the Temple Mount? Could an agreement be reached where both faiths share the space peacefully? It is a delicate balance, one that requires careful negotiation, international mediation, and, perhaps most importantly, a willingness from both sides to compromise. But history suggests that compromise has never come easily in Jerusalem. The biblical prophecy and the spiritual significance of the Third Temple. The Third Temple is more than just an architectural project. It is an idea that has been spoken of for centuries, woven into the fabric of biblical prophecy and religious expectation. It stands at the crossroads of faith, history, and the future, a symbol of divine presence and, for some, a sign of the last days. For Jews, it represents the long-awaited restoration of the house of God in Jerusalem, fulfilling the promises made throughout the Hebrew Scriptures. For many Christians, it is an ominous yet necessary sign of the approaching end times, setting the stage for the return of Jesus Christ. Across different religious traditions, the Third Temple carries immense spiritual weight, and its construction, or even the mere discussion of it, has profound implications. But what exactly does the Bible say about the Third Temple? Is it destined to be built? And if it is, what role does it play in God's divine plan? The Bible contains numerous references to a future temple, one that will play a critical role in the final events of history. Some of these passages are found in the Old Testament, while others appear in the New Testament, where they are closely tied to the concept of the end times. One of the most significant prophecies comes from the book of Daniel 9:27, where the prophet speaks of a ruler who will confirm a covenant, but later break it, entering the temple and desecrating it. This figure is often identified as the Antichrist, and his presence in the temple suggests that it must exist before the final events of history unfold. Jesus himself makes reference to this prophecy in Matthew 24:15, warning his followers to be on the lookout for the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place. This statement is often interpreted as a confirmation that a future temple will indeed be built, only to be defiled during the tribulation period. The Apostle Paul also writes about the temple in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, describing how the Antichrist will enter it and declare himself to be God. This passage reinforces the idea that the temple will exist as a focal point of global events, a place where spiritual deception and conflict will reach their peak. For those who take these prophecies literally, the construction of the third temple is not just a possibility. It is an inevitability, a piece of God's timeline that will set the stage for the final confrontation between good and evil. Does the third temple mark the beginning of the end times? This question has been at the heart of Christian eschatology for centuries. Many believers see the temple as a key signpost on the road to Christ's return, a physical indicator that the final prophecies are beginning to unfold. Throughout history, Christians have looked for signs of the end times in world events, wars, famines, political upheaval. But the third temple holds a special place in these discussions. If it is built, it would mark a dramatic shift in biblical prophecy, moving from the realm of expectation to reality. Some theologians argue that once the temple is rebuilt, it will initiate the sequence of events described in the book of Revelation: the rise of the Antichrist, the Great Tribulation, and eventually, the second coming of Christ. This belief has driven a sense of urgency among certain Christian groups, some of whom actively support efforts to see the temple restored. However, from a Jewish perspective, the focus is quite different. The primary concern is not the Antichrist or the tribulation, but rather the completion of Israel's divine mission. According to Jewish teachings, the third temple represents the fulfillment of God's promises, a house of prayer for all nations, and the final step in Israel's spiritual and national redemption. Some Jewish scholars see the rebuilding of the temple as an essential part of the Messianic era. Unlike the Christian view, which often associates the temple with a period of great suffering, Jewish teachings envision it as a time of peace and divine presence, a reversal of exile, a moment of unity between God and His people. Despite these differences, both perspectives acknowledge the enormous significance of the Third Temple. Whether as a symbol of restoration or as a sign of impending tribulation, its presence would mark a pivotal moment in history. If the Third Temple is to be built, what role does it serve in God's plan? Is it a place of worship, a warning sign, or something else entirely? Several key biblical passages attempt to answer this question. In Revelation 11:1-2, John is instructed to measure the temple, but to leave out the outer courts, which will be given to the Gentiles for 42 months. This suggests that while the temple will be built, it will be subject to conflict and occupation, an idea that aligns with the tensions we see in the world today. The prophet Ezekiel provides one of the most detailed descriptions of the future temple in Ezekiel 40-48. His vision outlines precise measurements, rituals, and the role of the temple in the restored kingdom of Israel. Some interpret this as a literal blueprint for the Third Temple, while others believe it symbolizes God's ultimate dwelling among His people. In Zechariah 6:12-13, another prophecy speaks of the Messiah building the true temple of the Lord. This raises an important question. Will any attempt to construct the temple before the arrival of the Messiah be legitimate? Some religious leaders argue that only the Messiah himself can build the final temple, and any human-led effort will ultimately fail. This debate adds another layer of complexity to the issue. If the Third Temple is built before the Messiah comes, does that mean it is not the true temple? Or does its construction actually pave the way for the Messianic age? The Third Temple carries different meanings for different people. For Jews, it is a long-awaited promise, a spiritual home that will restore divine worship to Jerusalem. For Christians, it is a sign that the end times are near. For Muslims, it is a potential source of conflict, a challenge to their holy sites. This diversity of perspectives makes the temple's reconstruction one of the most controversial religious topics in the world today. Some believe that a diplomatic solution could allow the temple to coexist with existing structures, while others see such an arrangement as impossible. Would the temple bring people together, or would it create new divisions? Could it become a house of prayer for all nations, as envisioned in Isaiah 56:7? Or would it ignite a war that spreads far beyond the borders of Israel? One thing is clear: if the third temple is ever built, it will change the course of history forever. Predictions and conclusions. The idea of the third temple has moved beyond just prophecy. It is a real and evolving discussion that touches on religion, politics, and international relations. With growing efforts from various Jewish organizations, political figures weighing in, and increasing tensions on the Temple Mount, the question is no longer just if the temple will be built, but when. Could it happen soon? Could we see the third temple completed by 2025? The answer to this question depends on several factors, including political developments, religious agreements, and the progress of construction efforts. For the temple to be completed by 2025, there would have to be an extraordinary shift in political will and global attitudes, one that seems unlikely in such a short time. But history has shown that change can come suddenly, and the Dome of the Rock, two of the most sacred sites in Islam. Palestinian leaders and many Islamic nations would view it as an act of war, possibly leading to another intifada or a larger regional conflict. Neighboring countries, particularly Iran and Turkey, could use the situation to rally Muslim nations against Israel, escalating tensions that are already at a boiling point. For Christians, reactions would be divided. Many evangelical Christians believe the temple's construction is a necessary step toward fulfilling biblical prophecy, and some have even provided financial and political support for efforts to rebuild it. However, others fear the consequences, seeing it as a sign of the end times, a moment that will bring great tribulation before the return of Christ. The international community, including world powers like the United States, Russia, and China, would be forced to respond. Would they back Israel's right to build, or would they pressure the government to abandon the project to maintain global stability? The temple's construction could shift alliances, disrupt economies, and even change the balance of power in the Middle East. For thousands of years, people have debated the meaning of biblical prophecies, searching for signs that the end times are near. The rebuilding of the temple has always been a central piece of this puzzle, a moment that many believe will mark the beginning of profound global change. Some argue that we are already witnessing the fulfillment of these prophecies. The return of Jews to Israel, the growing interest in rebuilding the temple, the rising tensions in Jerusalem. All of these events seem to align with ancient predictions. But are we truly on the verge of seeing prophecy unfold before our eyes? Or are these developments simply part of the natural cycle of history? That is for you to decide. What do you think? Could the third temple be completed soon? Would its construction lead to peace or war? And are we truly witnessing the final chapter of biblical prophecy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to stay updated on mysterious events, prophecies, and the unfolding story of the Third Temple. The future is closer than we think, and you won't want to miss what happens next. In the heart of Jerusalem, for the first time in nearly 2,000 years, a high priest has been appointed. This isn't a ceremony, it's a signal, a sign that ancient prophecies are accelerating, and that the rise of the Antichrist may be closer than anyone dares to believe. If you're only watching the headlines, you're already missing the real story. Stay with us and discover the truth unfolding just beyond the world's gaze. Jerusalem's role has never been accidental. Across thousands of years, it has remained the spiritual heart of God's covenant with humanity. A city where heaven and earth seem to draw nearer. In modern times, political conflicts dominate the conversation around Jerusalem. Yet, while the world debates, something far more important has been steadily advancing: the groundwork for the restoration of ancient temple worship. This is not merely ideological or symbolic. Practical measures have been taken. Sacred vessels have been meticulously recreated. Priestly garments, woven according to specifications laid out in Scripture, have been completed. Institutions dedicated to priestly education have emerged, teaching young men the forgotten rites of sacrifice and service. Every item, every procedure, every moment of preparation has been aimed at one goal: readiness. The infrastructure is not theoretical. It is real, tangible, and waiting. What remains missing is not knowledge, nor will, but a physical place where it can all be put into motion. This movement is not headline news. It is happening quietly, without fanfare, as prophetic moments often do. And at the center of this quiet preparation, a pivotal figure has now been chosen. In the midst of this groundwork, a name has emerged: Baruch Kahane. The restored Sanhedrin, a body aiming to revive the religious leadership structures of ancient Israel, has formally appointed him as high priest. This is not a ceremonial title. It is a functional role prepared for activation should the opportunity arise. Baruch Kahane's preparation has been deliberate. He has undergone extensive training in Mosaic law, temple rituals, priestly purification, and sacrificial practices. Disciplines dormant for centuries, but now brought back to life with painstaking detail. His ancestral legitimacy has been confirmed through genetic markers shared among descendants of Aaron, preserving an unbroken line across the millennia. And beyond academic knowledge, he has taken part in sanctioned sacrificial rehearsals, applying ancient laws to modern practice with careful fidelity. This appointment does more than restore a title. It restores an office, a living priesthood that has been absent since the fall of the Second Temple in 70 AD. With Baruch Kahan, Israel now possesses not only the vessels, garments, and knowledge, but also the man ready to fulfill them. The machinery of ancient worship is no longer theoretical. It is assembled. It is active. And this reality brings profound prophetic implications into sharper focus. Prophecy has long declared that the final chapters of human history would involve a resumption of sacrifices, only to be interrupted in a moment of terrible desecration. The abomination of desolation, described in Daniel 9:27 and echoed in 2 Thessalonians 2:4. For generations, the question lingered: how could these prophecies come to pass without a functioning temple? Without trained priests? Without the sacred vessels and systems in place? Today, those barriers have been quietly dismantled. The existence of a prepared high priest means the resumption of sacrifices could begin almost immediately if political and physical circumstances allowed. The road once blocked by centuries of absence has been cleared. The practical possibility of temple worship is no longer remote. It stands close at hand, tangible, operational, waiting for the right moment in time. This changes the nature of the prophetic timeline dramatically. No longer do we speak in hypotheticals. No longer do we imagine distant possibilities. The conditions required for these pivotal end-time events are now present, and with them, a sobering realization. The fulfillment of these ancient warnings is not a future hope or fear. It is an unfolding reality. Each piece is moving into place. The only question that remains is, are we watching closely enough to see it? The office of high priest was not born of human ambition. It was established by God Himself at Mount Sinai, with Aaron anointed as the first to bear this sacred responsibility. The high priest alone was granted access into the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple, and only once a year on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. There, he would intercede for the people of Israel before the presence of God. For centuries, the high priesthood stood as a divine bridge between heaven and earth. But as time passed, corruption seeped into what had once been holy. During the Hellenistic and Roman periods, the priesthood became entangled with political power. High priests were appointed not for spiritual devotion, but through political maneuvering and bribery. It was under this corruption that Caiaphas and Annas, two deeply compromised high priests, conspired to condemn Jesus, fulfilling, though unknowingly, the scriptures they claimed to uphold. In 70 AD, judgment fell. The Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple. The sacrificial system was extinguished. The priesthood, once glorious, was shattered, just as Jesus had foretold. Since that day, Israel has been without a functioning priesthood, exactly as Hosea 3:4 prophesied. For the children of Israel shall dwell many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. For nearly 2,000 years, the office of high priest remained silent. Until now. For centuries after the temple's fall, talk of its restoration was confined to theology books, synagogue prayers, and whispered longings. It was seen as a future hope, symbolic, distant, even improbable. But that is no longer the case. Today, the Third Temple is not a symbol. It is a tangible project. Physical artifacts have been recreated. Ritual experts have been trained. A high priest has been appointed and is ready to serve. This is no longer the language of someday. It is the reality of now prepared. Every piece required for temple service, vessels, garments, personnel, and procedures, has been assembled with painstaking accuracy. The prophetic clock is no longer quietly ticking in the background. It is ringing, loudly, urgently, for those willing to hear. These developments mark a definitive shift from abstraction to reality, a line crossed without public fanfare, but with eternal consequences. The question is no longer, could these things happen? The question is, how soon will they begin? And as the temple system moves toward restoration, it creates the conditions necessary for one of prophecy's darkest figures to step onto the stage. Scripture is unambiguous about the events surrounding the rise of the Antichrist. Daniel 9:27 speaks of a covenant made with many, the resumption of sacrifices, and a sudden, violent cessation halfway through the prophetic week. It is in this context that the abomination of desolation will unfold, an act of supreme blasphemy. 2 Thessalonians 2:4 paints the picture vividly. The Antichrist will enter the restored temple, seat himself within it, and proclaim himself to be God. But there is a logical sequence in these events. Sacrifices cannot be stopped unless they have first been restarted. Temple rituals cannot be defiled unless they have first been reestablished. And now, for the first time in nearly 2,000 years, every precondition necessary for these acts to occur is within reach. The system is ready. The priesthood is functional. The altar stands prepared. The vessels gleam under the Jerusalem sun. The machinery of fulfillment is in place. The revelation of the Antichrist no longer depends on theoretical possibilities. It depends only on the moment when the restored temple service is reignited. What was once a distant expectation is now a living reality, poised at the edge of history, waiting for the prophetic spark to ignite. In a time when skepticism often demands empirical proof, even science has offered its validation to the prophetic preparation underway. Genetic research into the Cohen-modal haplotype, a distinctive set of genetic markers shared by the descendants of Aaron, has confirmed the priestly lineage with remarkable consistency. What was preserved for thousands of years through careful tradition has now been affirmed by modern science. But confirmation alone is not enough. Preparation has followed. Hundreds of men identified as Kohanim, priestly descendants, have been gathered and rigorously trained. Their education covers every aspect of temple service, the intricate procedures of sacrificial rituals, the stringent laws of purity, and the revival of Levitical music, performed using instruments meticulously reconstructed according to biblical descriptions. Even the music intended for temple ceremonies, melodies that once echoed in Solomon's temple, has been revived. Ancient instruments, from silver trumpets to harps, have been recreated, and the traditional sounds of worship are being rehearsed once more, awaiting the day they will rise again over Jerusalem. This is not nostalgia, it is active preparation. Science, history, and devotion have converged, ensuring that when the moment arrives, those appointed to serve will be ready without delay. Yet despite all this readiness, a final, formidable obstacle remains. At the center of both hope and tension stands the Temple Mount, the most contested religious site on earth. Today, control of the Mount rests primarily with Islamic authorities, and any discussion of Jewish worship or construction on the site sparks intense political and religious conflict. It is the last significant hurdle before full temple service can be restored. The leadership of the Temple Institute has made it clear, once access to the Temple Mount is granted, complete temple service could begin within weeks. The vessels, garments, altar, and trained priests already stand ready. But as of now, the gates remain closed. However, history teaches us that geopolitical realities can shift swiftly, often without warning. A political agreement, a religious crisis, or a moment of upheaval could suddenly alter the present restrictions, opening the door for events to move rapidly. What seems immovable today could, under the right circumstances, change almost overnight. Prophecy has never depended on human timing. It unfolds according to divine schedule, often when least expected. Thus, the final preparations rest at the threshold, awaiting only a single, decisive shift. And for believers, the urgency of this moment demands more than passive observation. Amid these historic developments, a sobering reality emerges. Many within the Christian church remain unaware, indifferent, or even dismissive of the prophetic milestones materializing before their eyes. But ignorance does not delay fulfillment, and indifference does not excuse responsibility. The assembling of these prophetic pieces signals that the time is shorter than many realize. While the restoration of temple service holds profound prophetic significance, Christians must remember an even greater truth. Jesus Christ is already our eternal high priest. His sacrifice was complete, final, and all-sufficient. No earthly ceremony, no future spectacle can replace what he accomplished on the cross. As prophetic events accelerate, deception will also rise. The church must be spiritually awake, not lulled into fascination with religious pageantry or political movements. The scriptures warn that signs and wonders will accompany deception in the last days, and the restoration of temple rituals will be a central stage for these coming tests. Vigilance, not fear, must govern the believer's response. Faith must be anchored not in institutions or spectacles, but in Christ Himself, the true mediator between God and man. This is not the time for distraction. It is the time for steadfastness. Conclusion. Prophecy is awakening before our eyes. The preparations are no longer theoretical. The altar is ready. The garments are ready. The priests are ready. The high priest is appointed. Every requirement for the restoration of temple service has been carefully and deliberately fulfilled. Only one barrier remains: access to the Temple Mount. Once that final obstacle is overcome, the stage will be fully set for the last act of the prophetic drama, including the revelation of the Antichrist, who will exploit the restored system for his ultimate deception. These things will not unfold randomly. They are moving according to a divine script written long ago. As the world drifts deeper into turmoil and distraction, Christians must remember that God's Word is unfolding with perfect precision. Nothing is happening by accident. Every piece is falling into place exactly as foretold. Our calling, now more than ever, is clear. Hold fast to Christ. Stay alert. Remain faithful. The days ahead will test every foundation. But those who stand on the unshakable rock will endure and overcome. For prophecy is not asleep. It is awakening before our eyes. A city that has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, and the stirrings of destiny itself, Jerusalem. But today, something feels different, something urgent. The ancient streets are whispering of a future foretold. And the question is it happening now? Jerusalem is preparing for something more profound than anyone imagined. A prophecy that's been dormant for centuries is suddenly alive. A cosmic shift that cannot be ignored. What is this ancient city on the edge of the world getting ready for? And most chilling of all, could it mean that Jesus is returning sooner than we ever thought possible? The signs are unmistakable. The world is on the brink. Are we ready to face the unimaginable? What startling discovery have Jerusalem's religious leaders uncovered that suggests the return of Jesus might happen in our lifetime? What unsettling geological activity beneath the Mount of Olives is shaking up scientists today? There's a prophecy that speaks directly to this. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will split in two. Jerusalem is witnessing events that are setting the stage for a world-changing moment. But is humanity truly prepared for what's unfolding? Or has the clock already passed the point of no return? Throughout history, believers have kept their eyes on four major prophetic signs that would signal the arrival of Christ. Right now, all four signs are converging. Which one should cause us the most concern? And why are some warning that the time to prevent what's coming might already be over? Among these signs, one stands out for its urgency. It might already be too late to halt it. The first sign, Israel's rebirth. Before Jesus returns, the Bible made it clear that Israel would be reborn as a nation. But it's not just about Israel's rebirth. It's the sequence of events that followed that gives this prophecy a new depth. One of the most astonishing prophecies, spoken over 2,500 years ago, became a reality in our time. Isaiah 66:8 says, "Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Can a nation be born in a day? Can a country be brought forth in a moment?" On May 14, 1948, this was fulfilled. Israel came into existence in a single day. What astronomical event happened that day, showing that God was behind Israel's restoration? This wasn't just a coincidence, it was a divine act. After nearly 2,000 years of exile, Israel rose again. But what mysterious force is driving the Jewish people to return at such an extraordinary speed. Many had believed Israel's return would never happen, but God had other plans. During the aftermath of World War II, a miracle unfolded. Against all odds, Israel was reborn. Prophecy began to unfold rapidly. In 1967, Israel reclaimed Jerusalem after nearly 2 millennia. In 1995, Jerusalem was declared Israel's eternal capital. In 2018, the U.S. officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The entire world is now fixated on Israel. The second sign, the gathering of the people. The Jewish people have not only returned to Israel, but they're coming back at an unprecedented rate. What's driving this extraordinary migration? What unseen force is at work? Deuteronomy 33 promises, "Then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he has scattered you." Ezekiel 37, 1-14 paints a picture of the people of Israel coming back to life, saying, "I will bring you back to the land of Israel." What supernatural power is making this gathering possible? The return isn't over. More and more are being called home each day. What might this final gathering indicate about the coming future? The third sign, the construction of the third temple. The Jewish people have long awaited the day the Holy Temple would be rebuilt. This prophecy is found in the books of Daniel, Revelation, and even in the teachings of Jesus. The preparations for this are already in motion. What sacred artifacts have been discovered recently that could lead to the rapid construction of the third temple? Once the temple is rebuilt, a pivotal moment in prophecy will be set in motion. In Daniel 9:27, it's foretold, "Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put an end to sacrifice and offering." A powerful world leader will broker a peace deal, but halfway through, he will halt the temple sacrifices, indicating that the temple must exist. What deals are being made behind the scenes to ensure the temple's reconstruction? 2 Thessalonians 2:4 speaks of a future ruler who will proclaim himself as God within the temple. For this to happen, the third temple must be built, and it's already in the works. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has already crafted the sacred menorah, reconstructed the high priest's garments, and forged the sacred vessels. Everything is ready. The only thing needed is permission to begin. What forces are conspiring to prevent the temple's construction? And who holds the key to its final approval? The final piece, the red heifer. Before the temple can be built, it must be purified, and according to Numbers 19:2, that purification requires a flawless red heifer. Speak to the children of Israel that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which a yoke has never come. For over 2 millennia, Israel has sought a red heifer that meets these requirements. In 2022, 5 perfect red heifers arrived in Israel from the United States. What eerie sign appeared the moment they landed, leaving the priests in fear? If one of these heifers remains pure until it reaches the proper age, it could be sacrificed, enabling the purification of the temple site. Where will the temple be built? Some speculate it will rise next to the Dome of the Rock. What newly discovered evidence might change everything we think we know about the true location of the temple? Jewish leaders are determined. They believe the temple will soon be built, and preparations are already underway. What conflicts are brewing that could determine the temple's fate? Is the final struggle already beginning in secret? The rebuilding of the third temple is not just a matter of faith. It's a countdown to the end, and the clock is ticking faster than ever before. As these events unfold, the end times grow nearer. The third temple is coming, and the time left to prepare is slipping away. The Bible foretells a time when the nations of the world will turn against Jerusalem. But what powerful coalition is secretly forming to betray this sacred city? As the world's political landscape shifts, there's growing pressure to divide Jerusalem, making it a flashpoint of global controversy. Does this scenario sound like it's becoming a reality? What secret discussions are happening behind closed doors to determine Jerusalem's future? Zechariah 12:3 says, "On that day, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock. All who try to move it will injure themselves." What disaster awaits the first nation to challenge this steadfast city? This is happening right now. The United Nations is in talks about how to control Jerusalem, and calls for splitting Israel are intensifying every day. What critical action is the UN about to take that could turn Jerusalem into a battleground in an instant? For the first time in history, all eyes are on this city, and the world is waiting to see how the situation unfolds. At the heart of the current international debate is the two-state solution, a proposal that seeks to divide Jerusalem and place parts of it under international oversight. However, the Bible makes it clear, Jerusalem is God's city, and any attempt to split it will result in judgment. What consequences will those nations face for attempting to divide His land? And how soon could this judgment unfold? Joel 3:2 warns, "I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will put them on trial for what they did to my inheritance, Israel, because they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land." Despite God's warning, the world is pushing forward with these plans. Around the world, we're seeing a disturbing trend. Countries that once supported Israel are now shifting their stance, condemning Israel's right to its own land. Major global powers are aligning against Jerusalem, and every influential leader has an opinion on what should happen to the city. This global focus is a clear indicator that biblical prophecy is unfolding before our eyes. The most contested piece of land in Jerusalem is the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism, where the first and second temples once stood, and where the third temple is expected to be built. The conflict surrounding this site is pushing the world toward a major confrontation. The Bible clearly states that the battle for Jerusalem will ignite a final global conflict, and we're seeing the pieces fall into place. Zechariah 14:2 says, "I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured. The world will gather against Jerusalem. The final war will center on this city, and when the nations rise against it, Jesus Himself will return." As the world conspires against Jerusalem, the city itself is preparing for the fulfillment of prophecy. The Jewish people are returning, and the alignment of events is happening at a pace that many didn't expect. The world may believe it controls the narrative, but God has already written the ending. Will the world's defiance of prophecy lead to its downfall? The King is on His way. But the greatest prophecy of all lies in the return of Jesus. Zechariah 14:4 says, "On that day His feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two. When Jesus returns, He will set foot on the Mount of Olives, and the earth will split as a sign of His arrival." But what strange occurrences are happening on the Mount of Olives right now that point to the moment when Jesus will return? When He touches the ground, the very earth will split in two. Scientists have identified a fault line running beneath the Mount of Olives, and if a significant earthquake were to occur, the mountain could split, just as the Bible foretold. What seismic activity is being observed under the Mount of Olives? And could it happen at any moment? Could this be the sign we've all been waiting for? The signs are all around us, and Jerusalem is on the verge of something monumental. Time is running out. What final signal will appear on the Mount of Olives that will confirm Jesus' return is imminent? What if that signal is already beginning to emerge? As Matthew 24:42 says, "Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming." The Bible stands alone as a history book, unlike any other you'll find in any library. It spans the entire story of the world, from its very creation to its eventual end. The reason it's so unique is that no human being was there at the start to witness it all firsthand. Therefore, no one could fully explain how everything began. But what makes us special is that we are the ones who know how everything will end. Thanks to God's Word. God didn't share these prophecies just to satisfy human curiosity. He gave them to us so we could be prepared, so we wouldn't be caught off guard when the events unfold. We can be thankful that Jesus was open and honest about what's to come. A common question today is, are we in the end times? The Bible speaks of the last days, and those days began over 2,000 years ago, at Pentecost. This was the start of the prophecies about the last days coming to life. Since that moment, every generation of believers has been called to live in anticipation of the Lord's return, ready at any moment. The Bible is full of prophecies, predictions about what is yet to come. There are 735 prophecies in total, and 1 out of every 4 chapters contains a prophetic message. Some books focus more on prophecy than others, but from cover to cover, the Bible is a prophetic book. Out of those 735 prophecies, 596 have already been fulfilled exactly as they were foretold. That means 81% of Bible prophecies have already come true. Some of these prophecies were written hundreds, even thousands of years before they happened. Given that 81% has already been fulfilled, it's not hard to believe that the remaining 19% will come to pass in the same way. The success rate of these prophecies is incredibly high. The Bible has been right 100% of the time regarding the prophecies fulfilled so far. Most of what remains are prophecies concerning the return of Jesus and the events that will unfold afterward. So, how many prophecies still need to be fulfilled before Jesus comes back? The number is around 20. We should be paying attention to these, watching for the signs as they unfold. Jesus himself told us to stay vigilant and pray. What exactly are we watching for? We're not meant to just stand still, gazing up at the sky, waiting for Jesus to appear. That's not the purpose of his words. He meant for us to observe what's happening in the world and be attentive to the signs he provided to help us be prepared. These signs are the signals we've been given. In Matthew 24, the disciples asked Jesus, "What will be the signs of your return?" Here, Jesus gave a clear and straightforward answer, which we can be grateful for, as it makes the future easier to understand. In Revelation, his answer is much more detailed, but in Matthew 24, he lists the key signs that will precede his return. While sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to Jesus privately, as recorded in Matthew 24. Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world?" Jesus replied, "Don't let anyone mislead you. Many will come in my name claiming, 'I am the Messiah.' They will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. And you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Jesus went on to explain that the gospel will be preached to all nations, and then the end will come. He warned them that when they saw the abomination that causes desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, they must flee. In that moment, Jesus said, "Those who are in Judea should flee to the mountains, and if someone is on the roof, they should not go back inside to gather belongings." It would be a time of terrible anguish, unlike anything the world has ever seen. And unless that time of tribulation is shortened, no one would survive. Jesus continued, warning of false messiahs and false prophets who would try to deceive even the elect. He urged his followers to ignore anyone claiming to know where he is, for his return would be as unmistakable as lightning flashing across the sky. Then, after a period of distress, the sun would be darkened, the moon would not give its light, and the stars would fall from the sky. But when this happens, the Son of Man will appear, and the people of the earth will mourn, as they see Jesus coming with great power and glory. His angels will gather his elect from all corners of the earth. Jesus then gave the disciples a lesson from the fig tree. When its branches become tender and its leaves sprout, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, you can know that it is near, right at the door. He told them, "This generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. While heaven and earth may pass away, his words will never disappear." But he also made it clear that no one knows the day or hour when this will take place. Not even the angels in heaven or Jesus himself, but only the Father.
They're also planning to slaughter 5 red cows. That paves the way for the building of the third temple, replacing the Dome of the Rock.
A momentous event is unfolding in Jerusalem, the red heifer sacrifice. But what does this mean for Judaism, Christianity, and the world as a whole? This ritual carries deep religious, historical, and geopolitical weight. Is it the fulfillment of ancient prophecy? A shift in global dynamics? Or something entirely different? In this video, we'll separate fact from fiction, providing in-depth analysis without speculation. Join us as we examine its potential impact on faith, society, and world affairs. Stay informed on historic events like this, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now, let's dive in. Throughout history, certain symbols have carried deep spiritual significance, transcending time and tradition. One such symbol, shrouded in mystery and reverence, is the red heifer, a seemingly ordinary animal by appearance. Yet its rarity and the weight of its religious implications have sparked theological discussions for centuries. But what exactly makes this heifer so significant? To answer that, we must journey through ancient scriptures, traditions, and interpretations that have kept the legend of the red heifer alive. The significance of the red heifer finds its earliest mention in the Hebrew Bible, specifically in Numbers 19, 2-10. In this passage, God commands Moses and Aaron to select a red heifer, flawless, unblemished, and without a single white or black hair, to be sacrificed outside the camp. Its ashes were then mixed with fresh water and used to purify individuals who had come into contact with the dead. At first glance, this ritual may seem like just another ancient purification practice, but its deeper meaning has puzzled scholars and theologians alike. Even King Solomon, regarded as the wisest of men, is said to have struggled with its full understanding. Unlike other sacrificial offerings, where the purpose is often clear, be it atonement, thanksgiving, or covenant renewal, The red heifer's ashes seemingly purify the impure, while paradoxically rendering the priest who performs the ritual unclean. This paradox has led to centuries of debate. Some Jewish sages believe it represents the ultimate test of faith, accepting divine wisdom without fully comprehending it. Others see it as a foreshadowing of deeper spiritual truths, hidden within the Torah's most perplexing decrees. Beyond its role in ancient purification rites, the red heifer holds an even greater significance in Jewish eschatology. According to rabbinic tradition, the construction of the Third Temple, an event of monumental religious importance, requires the presence of a red heifer. Jewish law stipulates that priests serving in the temple must be ritually pure, but achieving this state requires the purification waters made from the red heifer's ashes. Without this purification, temple service cannot be reinstated. This belief is central to many religious Jewish groups who actively search for a flawless red heifer, hoping that its arrival will signal the beginning of the long-awaited restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. However, the extreme rarity of a perfect red heifer makes this pursuit challenging. According to Jewish law, even the presence of 2 non-red hairs disqualifies a heifer. Throughout history, only a handful of red heifers have been identified and deemed suitable for this sacred role. This rarity has led many to wonder, does the elusive nature of the red heifer itself indicate divine timing? Is it God's way of controlling the moment when the Third Temple will be rebuilt? For many within Jewish tradition, the red heifer is not just a relic of ancient rituals. It is a harbinger of the Messianic age. The arrival of a qualified red heifer is believed to be a precursor to the coming of the Messiah, a time when peace and divine justice will be restored. This belief is particularly strong among those who advocate for the rebuilding of the Third Temple. The Temple Institute, an organization in Israel dedicated to its reconstruction, has been actively involved in identifying and breeding potential red heifers. Their work has drawn international attention, with each new birth of a red heifer sparking speculation. Could this be the one? Could we be on the brink of an unprecedented prophetic fulfillment? But this anticipation does not come without controversy. Any movement toward the rebuilding of the temple on the site of the former Jewish temples, the present-day Temple Mount, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque now stands, has significant geopolitical and religious implications. The question remains, will the pursuit of the red heifer unite believers or deepen the divide between religious communities? The fascination with the red heifer is not exclusive to Judaism. Within Christian eschatology, particularly among certain evangelical groups, the red heifer is seen as a sign of the end times. Some interpret its appearance as part of the prophetic puzzle leading up to the second coming of Christ. The Book of Revelation, with its vivid imagery and apocalyptic prophecies, is often cited in connection with this belief. Some evangelicals point to passages that discuss the restoration of the temple and the final Great Tribulation before Christ's return. To them, the identification of a red heifer could be one of the final signs before these events unfold. However, within broader Christian theology, there is a theological debate regarding the relevance of the red heifer after Christ's sacrifice. Many Christian scholars argue that Jesus' death on the cross fulfilled the need for purification once and for all, replacing the sacrificial system entirely. The Epistle to the Hebrews, Hebrews 9:13-14, makes this argument, stating that Christ's blood cleanses believers in a way that the ashes of a red heifer never could. Despite this, interest in the red heifer among Christian circles remains high. Organizations and individuals who study biblical prophecy closely monitor news from Israel, waiting to see if a flawless red heifer will be discovered and what that might mean for world events. In recent months, news out of Jerusalem has confirmed what many have long speculated. preparations for the sacrifice of a red heifer are actively underway. What was once an obscure topic discussed among religious scholars has now become a global conversation, drawing interest, excitement, and controversy. One of the most vocal figures in this discussion is Pastor Greg Locke, an evangelical leader who has publicly stated that the sacrifice will take place soon. His announcement has fueled speculation among Christian prophecy watchers, with many seeing this as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. At the same time, it has raised concerns among others who fear the potential religious and political consequences of such an event. But Locke is not alone in his anticipation. Jewish religious authorities and scholars are also closely monitoring the developments. Some believe that if the sacrifice proceeds and a qualified red heifer is successfully used for purification, it could bring Israel one step closer to the rebuilding of the Third Temple, a long-awaited event in Jewish eschatology. At the core of this unfolding story are 6 red heifers, carefully transported to Israel from the United States under strict rabbinical supervision. These heifers were selected based on the rigorous biblical criteria. Every hair on their body was examined to ensure they met the Torah's strict purity standards. However, not all have remained eligible. 3 of the 6 heifers have now aged out, growing beyond the required age limit set by Jewish law. This leaves only 3 remaining candidates, each currently undergoing detailed inspections to determine whether they truly qualify for the sacred role. The examination process is meticulous. Even 2 non-red hairs or minor blemishes could render them impure and unfit for the ritual. Every aspect of their physical condition is being scrutinized, and their history is being carefully reviewed. If any of the heifers have been placed under a yoke or have carried a burden, they are automatically disqualified. If even one of the 3 remaining heifers is confirmed as perfectly red, the final preparations for the long-awaited sacrifice could begin. However, if none meet the standard, the search will continue, and the prophecy, at least for now, will remain unfulfilled. If a pure red heifer is found and sacrificed, its ashes will be prepared according to biblical law and stored for use in purification rituals. For many religious Jews, this would mark an unprecedented moment in history, a return to ancient practices that have not been performed for nearly 2,000 years. If a red heifer is found and declared pure, where will the sacrifice take place? Will religious authorities push for access to the Temple Mount? And how will Israel's government navigate the delicate balance between fulfilling religious prophecies and maintaining regional stability? These questions have no simple answers, yet they are critical as the world watches this historic moment unfold. The search for the red heifer and the possibility of its ritual sacrifice are not just religious matters, they also carry major political and social implications. While some see it as the fulfillment of divine prophecy, others worry about its potential to reshape regional and global politics. With growing interest from religious and political groups, the debate is no longer confined to theology. It is now deeply intertwined with geopolitical strategy, national policies, and international relations. Within Israel, the red heifer's significance is being closely watched not only by religious groups, but also by political factions. The construction of the Third Temple, a long-debated topic, has been revived in national discourse, with some politicians and religious leaders openly advocating for it. Several right-wing religious parties and nationalist groups in Israel support efforts that could pave the way for Jewish worship on the Temple Mount, arguing that religious freedom should extend to Judaism's holiest site. However, such ambitions carry serious risks, as the Temple Mount is also home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the most sacred places in Islam. The Israeli government, while largely cautious, is not indifferent. Religious and political leaders are monitoring the red heifer situation, aware that any movement toward temple-related activities could have profound consequences on interfaith relations and domestic policies. Some key questions remain. If a pure red heifer is found, will the Israeli government allow the ritual to proceed? Could this shift public policy regarding religious access to the Temple Mount? Would such a move inflame tensions with Muslim communities and neighboring countries? The outcome of this debate could shape not only Israel's internal politics, but also its relationships with the broader international community. One of the most influential political figures connected to this issue is former U.S. President Donald Trump. His presidency significantly impacted Israeli politics and U.S.-Israel relations, particularly through policies that were widely supported by nationalist and religious factions. Trump's 2017 decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move the U.S. Embassy there was a historic shift, one that aligned closely with evangelical Christian and Jewish religious perspectives regarding biblical prophecy. His administration also brokered the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations between Israel and several Arab nations, further solidifying his influence in the region. Trump's close relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu and his strong backing from right-wing Israeli groups further cemented his influence on Israeli policies. Among religious Zionists and Jewish nationalist movements, Trump is seen as having played a key role in advancing Israel's biblical destiny, including potential steps toward the rebuilding of the temple. Evangelical Christian groups in the United States, a major support base for Trump, are also deeply invested in the red heifer prophecy. Many believe that the identification and sacrifice of a red heifer could be a key event leading to the second coming of Christ. This has led to American religious and political groups closely watching developments in Israel, with some even contributing financial and logistical support toward temple-related projects. Could Trump's continued influence in Israeli politics play a role in accelerating the process? While no direct political moves have been made, his impact on Israel's right-wing religious landscape remains undeniable. Beyond Israel and the United States, the international reaction to the red heifer developments has been deeply divided. For some, it is a moment of religious significance, while for others, it is a geopolitical flashpoint with the potential to ignite tensions across the Middle East. For many Muslim leaders and scholars, discussions surrounding the Third Temple and Jewish religious activities on the Temple Mount are seen as a serious threat. The prospect of increased Jewish religious access, or even attempts to prepare for temple-related rituals, has previously led to violent clashes and heightened tensions in Jerusalem. Some Muslim groups believe that the focus on the red heifer and temple rebuilding efforts is a direct challenge to the status quo on the Temple Mount Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Palestinian leaders and some Arab nations have warned that any steps toward Jewish control over the site could trigger regional unrest. These concerns are not just theoretical. Past conflicts over the Temple Mount, such as the Second Intifada in 2000, which was partly sparked by political visits to the holy site, show how quickly tensions over religious sovereignty in Jerusalem can escalate. If the red heifer sacrifice is perceived as part of a larger effort to reclaim the site for Jewish worship, it could lead. As discussions about the red heifer continue to unfold, opinions remain deeply divided. For some, this is an event of immense religious significance, tied to biblical prophecy and the future of the temple. For others, it is a historical curiosity, an ancient practice revived in the modern world. And for many, it is a political flashpoint, capable of reshaping interfaith relations and regional stability. While emotions run high on all sides, it is important to take an objective look at how different religious and secular groups interpret this moment. For many Orthodox Jews, the red heifer's role in prophecy is undeniable. According to Jewish tradition, the arrival of a pure red heifer is a precursor to the Messianic age, a sign that God's divine plan is unfolding. Religious authorities preparing for the ritual sacrifice see this as a necessary step toward the restoration of temple service. Organizations such as the Temple Institute in Israel have spent decades researching and recreating sacred temple artifacts, ensuring that when the time comes, ritual purity laws can be followed precisely. However, within Judaism itself, there is no universal consensus. While some rabbinic authorities support Third Temple movements, others remain skeptical or opposed. The construction of the Third Temple is a deeply sensitive issue, and some Jewish scholars believe it should only happen when the Messiah arrives, not through human intervention. This divide raises an important question. If a pure red heifer is found, will the Jewish world unite around it, or will internal theological differences create further debate? Among Christians, reactions to the red heifer are equally diverse. For many evangelical Christians, the red heifer represents a key moment in biblical prophecy, a sign that the world is approaching the second coming of Christ. Some believe that the rebuilding of the temple and the resumption of Jewish sacrifices will set the stage for the fulfillment of end-times prophecies described in the book of Revelation. However, not all Christians share this perspective. Catholic and mainstream Protestant groups generally see no theological significance in the red heifer's sacrifice. Many hold that Jesus' death and resurrection rendered Old Testament sacrifices obsolete, making the revival of temple rituals spiritually irrelevant. Even within evangelical circles, opinions vary. Some view the event as a genuine sign of prophecy, while others see it as a political and religious movement influenced by Zionism and nationalist ideologies rather than divine intervention. This raises a broader question. Is the red heifer truly a sign from God, or is its significance being shaped by human interpretation and political motives? Outside of religious perspectives, the red heifer event is still seen as historically and culturally significant. Historians and archaeologists are fascinated by the revival of an ancient biblical practice, one that has not been performed for nearly 2,000 years. Political analysts recognize the potential for increased tensions in Jerusalem, particularly concerning the status of the Temple Mount. Secular observers see it as a symbolic religious event that, while interesting, holds no direct impact on world affairs unless it sparks broader conflicts. Whether one sees the red heifer as a spiritual sign, a political catalyst, or a historical anomaly, it is impossible to ignore the global attention it has received. The red heifer sacrifice is not just a religious event. It is a moment of profound significance that touches on faith, history, politics, and prophecy. For Orthodox Jews, it represents a step toward the Messianic age and the possible rebuilding of the Third Temple. For evangelical Christians, it is viewed as a sign of the end times and the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. For political analysts, it could reshape Israeli policies and interfaith relations on the Temple Mount. For historians and scholars, it marks the revival of a lost biblical tradition, unseen for millennia. Yet, its true impact remains uncertain. Will it lead to the actual rebuilding of the Third Temple? Will it increase tensions in Jerusalem? Or will it remain a symbolic event, debated but never fully realized? Now, we turn to you. Do you see this as a sign of the end times, or simply the revival of an ancient tradition? Is this a step toward biblical prophecy, or a politically driven movement? How do you think this event will impact religious and political relations in the coming years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this discussion insightful, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow for more in-depth explorations of religious, historical, and geopolitical events shaping our world today. The conversation doesn't end here. It's just beginning.